Great. So I think we're just about at time. So welcome, bienvenue to this gathering of the heritage sector hosted by the National Trust for Canada. My name is Natalie Bull. I'm Executive Director. I'll introduce my colleagues here on the screen shortly. The purpose of this gathering is to talk about Federal Budget 2021. There is an open consultation at the moment. We wanted to bring the sector together, consult with you, share where we've been on this topic so far this year, and really just to rally us all around an appropriate action plan. So again, you can use the chat to tell us who you are. There, I see, welcome Leslie. You might want to address your messages to all attendees so everyone on the line knows who's here together. Use the Q&A if you've got specific questions you'd like to address to any of the panelists. But this really is an open conversation, so we're encouraging you to weigh in with your thoughts and your questions. I think our panelists are probably all going to speak in English, but on encourage les questions et les commentaires dans la langue de votre choix. Alors n'hésitez pas. Before we get going, I wanted to acknowledge that I'm calling in today from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And I know that we're all participating from different parts of the country, and I encourage us all to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of the lands that we are participating from, and to reaffirm our collective commitment and our responsibility to be part of a movement of reconciliation and collaboration. And I also want to acknowledge that it's Black History Month, and I'm sure all of us are sharing information and learning more about the heritage of underrepresented communities in our country. The next slide. So just a word about the National Trust. I think many of you know what the National Trust is up to. We're a national registered charity. We strive to provide game-changing support, expertise and funding to heritage sites and heritage organizations across the country. A big part of our work is our advocacy work, leadership for the sector, looking for public policy changes that will help keep useful and older heritage buildings out of the landfill and support historic places that are part of resilient and sustainable communities. So these gatherings that we started hosting almost a year ago, I think it's a way for us to bring the sector together, because we really can't change public policy on our own as a single national organization. We really need the collaboration of the organizations we call our National Council, the provincial and territorial heritage NGOs, and really all the other organizations and individuals working in the heritage sector to be part of these conversations. So welcome. On the next slide, I'll introduce our panelists for today. Gil Barrows of Vox Public Affairs is a recurring figure. He's been an advisor for the sector, for the heritage sector for several years now. We're happy to have him with us today. Paul Gravett from Heritage BC, KLG from the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, two organizations that are part of our National Council, Chris Wiebe, my colleague here at the National Trust, and myself. And so and you, all of you, so make sure that you're active in that chat box and sharing your questions and comments. A quick agenda for today. We're going to briefly talk about the background of the federal budget conversations that we've had together as a group over the last year. We'll get a bit of current context and strategy from Gil Barrows. We'll share what we know about the budget consultation. And then we'll discuss together and sort out our action plan for what we're going to do between now and the close of the budget consultation, but also as the budget is released. And I'll just say that we will put out a newsletter on Thursday this week that will capture any action or templates or material that we think it would be useful to provide to all of you. We will put that together in our newsletter going out on Thursday, and everyone on the line will get that newsletter for sure. And I promise that we will wrap up at 1/4 the hour, so we'll try and keep things moving quickly. On the next slide, so just moving into the background, you may recall in the spring when COVID, we were getting our heads around the impact of COVID on the sector. We had a series of gatherings to talk about what messages we should be sending to the federal government. And ultimately we collaborated on a letter that we sent to 5 federal ministers that was co-signed and logos included from I think about 25 provincial and territorial heritage organizations. And in that letter, we really focused on the opportunity that historic places offer government to create jobs, to be part of action on climate change, to be part of a movement of reconciliation. So it was a very positive message of the potential of heritage projects to be part of the recovery of COVID-19. And so in that letter, we asked for $200 million earmarked for heritage projects. We talked about stimulus funding. And so then I think Gil's advice to us after putting that letter out there was that we really needed to back up that ask with real information. So again, with all of your help, we crowdsourced an incredible list of what we called shovel-ready heritage projects. That list is up to $371 million worth of work that, if funded, could create many, many green jobs and be part of recovery after COVID-19. In the process of doing that work, we had some interesting conversations with the folks at Infrastructure Canada, thinking that infrastructure money was probably our best bet to secure new funding for heritage. And we learned that really those decisions need to be made at the provincial level. So we then kicked off a process of encouraging our provincial colleagues to talk about those shovel-ready projects in their province with elected officials and government officials in their province. So I think I'm going to invite Paul Gravette from Heritage BC to tell a little brief story about what he made happen through the summer using the shovel-ready project idea. Paul.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Yes, when the Trust launched the Shovel Ready Heritage Projects program, we saw a great opportunity for BC. So we were very active in advocating to historic sites throughout BC to submit information to the form that the Trust had set up to collect this information. And we spent about, I would say, 3 months continually pounding at the sector to provide the information. In the end, we collected 78 proposals in 36 electoral districts throughout the province, so quite a good representation. The total project, the cost of the total project submissions or proposals, $186 million. In that was almost $42 million for conservation, so existing buildings. Interestingly, there were a lot of new builds in there, but that was, it was interesting to know that that's happening, and that would refer to, for example, new museums or proposed museums. We took this information and we provided many reports to the province, and I should just say that we had an ally in the province, someone who wanted this information, asked for this information. So we continually updated the reports. We provided many other reports around the benefits of heritage conservation vis-a-vis climate adaptation, climate change, economic stimulus, all sorts of reports, anything that I could find that would support the cause. It was all around the idea that heritage conservation can be a solution for the province's concerns. And so all of our research was around that. After quite a few months of this work, the province agreed to provide funding for what they called unique heritage infrastructure. So no new build in this particular situation. And we focused just on existing buildings. In our portion of the program, we had $15.52 million to distribute out of a total funding envelope of $90 million. And our colleagues at the First Peoples Cultural Council had around $5 million specifically for heritage conservation coming from Indigenous entities, so nations and such. We went through the program. Heritage BC managed the program, the funding program for the UHI, Unique Heritage Infrastructure. And we set up peer juries and we're just about to launch the results February 24th, the results go out and we start to issue checks and contracts. And I don't know, Natalie, do you want to hear more about the results at this time or later on?
Maybe, I think maybe a bit later we'll talk about the dollar value of projects and the demand that you stimulated there, Paul.
Sure.
But thank you so much. I think that's such an exciting success story that that every province and territory can take some hope from and potentially follow Paul's great example. And I think it's also a really interesting point for us all to be conscious of that interplay between federal funding and federal budgets and provincial funding. So something that we can continue to build on going forward. So that was the spring and summer shovel-ready efforts that we all came together around. In August, the government launched pre-budget consultations and called for submissions. And this was something that the National Trust shared with all of you through our newsletter. I think we shared a template and information about how anyone could make a submission. And I believe we encouraged everyone to stick to our, keep singing from that same hymn book, talking about a $200 million ask. Again, that really positive message about the potential benefits of investing in heritage as part of recovery. So in August 2020, on the next slide, you'll see an excerpt from the language that we submitted as part of the National Trust brief. And again, it's almost the same wording from that earlier letter to the minister, talking about 200 million in stimulus funding that would unlock billions of dollars in capital construction. And it's interesting to note that I think our earlier discussions, we had 4 recommendations. We sort of broke down our ask into 4 pieces, and ultimately the advice, what we all figured out together was to just keep it really simple and focus on one single ask. So that's the ask that we submitted in August. And now the government has come out with basically a more public pre-consultation process with a questionnaire online, inviting all Canadians to participate. So today we're talking about how can we leverage that opportunity? What should we be doing next? So I think at this point, I will turn it over to Chris and Gil, my colleague Chris and Gil, to talk about recent developments, the federal green plan, just sort of getting our head around what has changed and how should we now be thinking about this opportunity. Over to you, Chris.
Okay, thanks. And then I'll pass it off to Gil. Just really quickly, Chris Weeb. We had a chance in January, and it's on our website, and we can provide a link later. Had a chance to go look at the new federal green plan in detail with a kind of a heritage lens. Its official title is A Healthy Environment and a Healthy Economy, and a long subtitle. But I think what's really interesting is that it provides a document that gives us something to think about, more conventional approaches to the green and sustainability response, and how we're going to have to up our game as a heritage sector in terms of trying to fit our vision into that. And what's really interesting is that they really focused in that document on the building energy performance as opposed to embodied energy, and they also really sort of focused on the green building material supply chain. So I think those really open up all sorts of interesting opportunities for us. On the green building supply chain, it's so interesting because doing some research, there's 1.4 million tons of wood goes into the landfill. This is an estimate because Canada doesn't actually capture its CRD waste very accurately. 1.4 million tons of wood go into the landfill every year in Canada. It's just an astonishing and arresting number. And they're thinking about this idea of planting 2 billion trees in that document. I would also say we should be saving 2 billion trees from being cut down in the first place by reusing older buildings as well. So I think there's all sorts of ways for us in there, but one of their big things is about smart retrofits, about good retrofits to existing buildings. They do talk about that quite a bit in there, more on the kind of the operational side than keeping the embodied energy side. but the one thing, and I think Gil will point to this too, one of the big things is green jobs, creating green jobs of tomorrow. And I think that's a real key, both for the COVID recovery kind of discussion that they have, but also for us as a sector, is around how do we frame our response to the pandemic as a Build Back Better opportunity, with heritage being a part of those green solutions, in that we're reusing what already exists and capitalizing on that sunk carbon of buildings and avoided emissions. So I think have a look at it. There's some really interesting things there. Gil, did you have some other elements you wanted to bring in about the federal situation?
Thanks, Chris. I may sound a bit like a broken record, but you know, there are big opportunities here. There's a lot of money circulating, going from the federal government to the provinces, and you know, you always try to chase the pots of money where you find them. And the issue really is jobs. That's what's preoccupying the center, the Prime Minister's office, the department heads, the Privy Council office. Now, having said that, the problem here is that the opportunity won't last, because at some point, you know, Canada is running up a record deficit, and at some point, you know, when COVID is brought under control, these pools of money are going to have to be cut back. You know, we have to pay the bills at some time. So this is the time to get onto it, and the federal budget consultations are one way to do it. And I think National Trust will probably ask you people to take part in the consultation. You can do it in two ways. One is a very simple questionnaire, which you can fill out. And the thing, whether you're doing a questionnaire or submitting a full brief, is that the whole sector, in my opinion, needs to stick on a consistent message. I've been doing government relations for more decades than I'd care to acknowledge. And I've looked at, you know, I've seen the people like the defense industry operating and the pharmaceutical industry operating. But for my money, the most effective lobby in Canada has been the dairy farmers of Canada. Those people have got their message down across the country, and they stick to it, and they hammer it, and they hammer their provincial representatives, and they hammer their federal representatives. And I think that's really key to getting your message across. I see we got 82 participants on this call. 82 messages into the government would be effective. And I think that what really is on people's mind at the center of government, in the Prime Minister's office, Privy Council office, finance, is jobs and the environment. And for instance, if you took that questionnaire and filled that in, and it would only take you 20, 30 minutes, I think, you could answer all the questions and segue back to jobs and the environment. The heritage sector can deliver jobs, and that's what people are preoccupied with right now. Think that there's the questionnaire, or your other option is you can submit a brief. Now, a brief is going to be more effective, but I recognize that some people may not have time to put together a brief, although I think it wouldn't be that difficult with the information that the National Trust is supplying you. And again, that needs to concentrate, in my opinion, on jobs and infrastructure and what the heritage sector can do for employment and the environment. And I think just sticking to those clear, consistent messages across the country can be quite effective. So number one, I would encourage you to either fill in that questionnaire, but probably more productively, do a brief and let the National Trust know about it. And then I assume that, Natalie, that the National Trust would take all the submissions and collate them and put them in together into one submission.
Yes.
Any more? I'm happy to take any questions if people want to ask.
And I'm wondering too, if some of the organizations on the line did submit briefs in the summer as part of that first wave of pre-budget consultation, budget pre-consultation. Just tell us in the chat or sing out. And Chris, maybe would you like to walk through, I think you've pulled up some of the screenshots of what the questionnaire looks like, just to give people a flavor of the questions.
Yeah, no, why don't we just advance to the questions in the next slide, actually, Natalie. So yeah, here, I wish I could have pulled it out, and I'm sorry it's screenshots, but I don't know, some kind of website security, I couldn't capture them. But I would think is interesting here is that it sort of gives us, these questions give us an X-ray that can into, you know, sort of the political and policy preoccupations of the government that Gil has been, you know, mentioning. And I think it's not as simple as just going through when you look at it with a heritage lens, these questions and these formulaic answers, they don't quite doesn't quite fit with what the heritage movement's ideas are. And I think we'll often end up clicking other and connecting the dots between a number of them. Like for this one's, for instance, there's jobs, there's the green response and kind of the small business element there. But then you see at the bottom, invest in technologies to accelerate Canada's green transformation. Rather than new technologies, maybe we're thinking about old technologies. Maybe we're thinking about, you know, leveraging what already exists, the sunk carbon in places. So I think it's about spinning and kind of reframing some of these more conventional ideas that they bring across there. Natalie, the next one, actually, if you wouldn't mind going to that. This one's looking at about how to recover, you know, about COVID recovery and, you know, employment and jobs. The interesting thing there, I mean, I saw like GDP growth. I think it's kind of one of those kind of perverse things where if you knock down a building and rebuild it, you get more GDP growth. There's something around the way GDP is calculated that doesn't accurately capture the work being done in rehabilitation. But here we see they're very fixated on jobs, and we'd want to frame that. Next one, Natalie.
So Chris, maybe before we leave that one, a good question here from Sarah. Could one leverage heritage trades as part of green job creation? I would think absolutely, since I know that conservation of buildings requires heritage trades to keep them functional.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. And I think we'll see that elsewhere in terms of training in some of the answers as well. And the need for ramping up those skills. We just saw a program coming out of Quebec, where they're trying to foster heritage trades and craft skills because they just don't have the people to do the work on a lot of their structures. And so I'm seeing that kind of an opportunity for skilled middle class green jobs that grow out of this whole kind of COVID recovery situation. So yeah, the next one, I'm not sure if this one, I mean, like, I guess you can see here, it's that kind of the idea of innovation to spur jobs and green economy. I think here, like low carbon options, make them more affordable to Canadians. I think pushing the rehabilitation sort of side of things and the retrofitting of existing buildings would really resonate well here. I guess also there's another part there where it's talking about incentives on the right-hand side, provide incentives to encourage businesses to invest in clean technology to help assist Canada's green transformation. Well, maybe the clean technology is about reusing the building you already have your organization in. So I think if we can kind of reframe some of these elements here in the other section, I think that could be helpful. Number 4, Natalie. What are the important ways we can have an inclusive recovery? Well, I mean, there's the jobs there, obviously, in terms of accessibility and that kind of thing. I guess We could also reframe it in terms of the affordable housing is a big one, in reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And I think, as Natalie was saying, with Paul and the Heritage BC kind of program, there was a whole resource of money funding there for the First Peoples Cultural Council to achieve cultural heritage ends for Indigenous groups and communities there. So you can see some of the preoccupations there, and you can see around, students and retraining. And then why don't you go to the last one, Natalie, just so you get a sense. You can go through this in detail yourselves. What are the top priorities for budget 2021? And you're supposed to select 3. And I could see one like right on that first column there about environment and fighting climate change, key and affordable housing, but also, the way the heritage kind of ask intersects with the infrastructure, education skills, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and creating opportunities. I think there's all sorts of ways for us to connect with a lot of the things that they're talking about here. And I think, well, the last one, if you want to go over, flip over to the last 2 questions, Natalie, just to give people a quick scamper over the entire document. Oh, don't have it there. Well, there's another question. There's some general questions where you can put in your own answers. And I mean, we could provide some opportunities for examples for people to introduce into these sections to help stimulate you. So a quick overview there.
So now let's just really open it up for discussion and input. And again, this is about building our capacity as a sector to influence these decisions that are making that will affect historic places in every part of the country. And I know we've got some great organizations. Roxana from the Mohawk Chapel is on the line. We've got Marion from the Association Heritage New Brunswick. We've got representatives from the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals, John from Guild Park, lots of great people on the call today. And we really need to be pulling in the same direction if we're going to get traction with this budget. So I think we've heard from Gil. People should, I think Chris and I can provide in the newsletter on Thursday easily material that you can easily pull out and use to either do your own brief or to use the online system. So kind of making sure that we are all hitting those key messages. I would like to suggest too, and maybe Paul and Kay, your opinion. I really believe that shovel-ready list has a lot of power and potential, and that for us to be able to say, like, I think in our first ask, we said $200 million would unlock billions of dollars in construction. So we're really not at $1 billion yet with our list. I really think we need to build that information and make it possible for every heritage advocate, every organization to quickly find the list of 50 great heritage projects that could happen in your community if the funding was available. So is that something people would be willing to continue to submit? Paul and Kay, what are your thoughts about that work?
Well, for sure, it would be helpful to have the list that's already compiled more publicly accessible. I know I did use it, and I had the opportunity to showcase some of those when I spoke to the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs at the legislature. And I think that's a great opportunity we have too, when we meet with MPPs. Like we do a one-day meeting. We've done this for a number of years with MPPs, and so we can tell, if that list is easy to access, then it's a matter of kind of telling them, well, here in your riding, you could make this theater open again. This senior center could expand its services. That kind of thing would be really helpful to be able to say.
I think it's a way to make it real.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, did you want to add anything?
Well, yes, it does make it real. For BC, it was quite important that the province know if it provides money, that the money will result in good, that something will happen. So it's not just speculative. And by providing the shovel-ready projects, the government had assurance that something can happen. So we demonstrated that there is a need out there. When it came to the actual program itself, I mentioned we had about 78 proposals for the shovel-ready report. For the actual intake of the program, we had 158 submissions, so it increased considerably. Also, to Natalie, to your point, when you said you're not at $1 billion yet, there is the multiplier effect that has to come into it. And we will actually be reporting this week to the province that the $15.52 million that's going out to unique heritage infrastructure will result in a total spend of $25 million and an overall GDP contribution of $14.3 million. So it's yes, there's the initial investment, but it starts to build up beyond that.
Right. And Paul, you had shared some figures about the total demand. I don't know if you mentioned that in this call, but again, I think it provides some real data for each of us in our provinces to, like, that $200 million number was kind of made up, let's face it, because we didn't have any information about the kinds of projects that were out there. And I think you're now getting really good data from the province, from what's happening in the province around that funding, to get a sense of what the real number is, how much work there actually could be if the funding was there.
Well, in fact, your 200,000 is probably short. In our intake for UHI, we had funding requests for $73.6 million, and that's just one province.
Right.
And that's all, effectively, that's all deferred maintenance of some type. And we were only able to fund 21% of the request, the financial request.
Right. I wonder, Gil, do you think it would be worth it for us to basically update, like we can say the 200 million, we now know based on this program in BC that the actual potential is much higher than that? Again,
I don't see why you wouldn't. It's real, and BC's demonstrated it. And you're getting back to the question of, economic contribution and jobs, and that's, why not? Sure.
Great.
Oh, just Chris here. I'm just seeing a note from Catherine Naismith here in Toronto, and she's asking, I went looking for Ontario projects on shovel-ready projects, but could only find 2. Is that because there haven't been that many submissions? I think there was, I don't know which document you're looking at, Kathy, but we'll have to pull it out. Ours behind the scenes has more like 30 or 40, 35, 40, but there must be more in Ontario. But I think it was just a matter of the bush beating that Paul was talking to. And I guess it came at a time in the summer where we were collecting them. Maybe it was harder to capture people's attention. But that's why I think it could be really useful to reboot that whole project and add on to what's already there to make it real in terms of the potential to hit a lot of these different places. Sorry, Kay, go ahead.
Right. Yeah. I just wanted to say I actually counted up 50 when you get the spreadsheet, but on, I think Catherine's referring to the article that showed, where we highlighted, and there were 2 highlighted in Ontario. One of them was the Moose River one. I know Cecil's on this call today, and another one was one in Etobicoke, I believe. But I just sharing my screen here just to show, because I want to share these resources with other people. ACO's worked really hard to put together resources for the presentation, I guess, our meetings with MPP, and we've continued to build on that. We got a Young Canada Works student last year that added to these, so that's something that we've been doing, and so we're happy to share that. I just put up the screen with the economic development one, but we have them on also the tourism and environmental benefits too. So that's a resource that if people need some arguments, we can help with.
Great, thanks so much. And just seeing comments from people, organizations that confirmed they did submit information about the budget. So thanks so much. Like, we really are all in this together and are only stronger if we do this work together. And I know we were pushing hard through the summer and asking a lot of all of you, but I think we're really building something increasingly powerful and effective together.
Can I ask a question, since I get to talk loud here of Chris? I mean, because you kind of went through that questionnaire and suggested some ways we might answer. So I'm wondering if you want to give us a little guidance on that. I mean, again, it's this idea of singing from the same songbook.
Yeah, no, I think I wanted to, before I started, I want to create a document that helps people go through that exercise. But I was also sort of second guessing it and thinking, well, maybe it's better to, because there's an option with the pre-budget submission to either go through that multiple choice answer thing and include your other responses in a lot of those sections, or to submit a letter on your letterhead or something as a separate attachment. So I was trying to think, like, what would be more effective. I was also thinking of bouncing this off Gil too and Paul around. Is it more effective to put it into a letter, and then it's a letter that you can shop around, you can send to your MP, you can send to your local kind of area minister of whatever magnitude. You can even put it up online. Whereas if you do it through the multiple choice answer thing, it just sort of goes in and it disappears. I'm not sure if there's a residue that comes back to you that you can ship around. I was also sort of thinking, where would it be best to put our resources? Is it to use that template or create a separate document that can have a life of its own, I guess?
Well, in my view, a brief is going to be more effective because, Chris has said, here's the questionnaire and here's how you can kind of shoehorn your responses in. And, that's good. And if you don't have time to write a brief, do that, please. But a brief that you can outline in more detail what the opportunities are, and then, as Chris says, you can share. You can share it at the provincial level. You can share it with your MP or anybody who will influence the process, either at the federal level where the big pot of money is, or at the provincial level where the actual decision about where the money is going to be spent will take place.
So I guess what I'm hearing is you probably need to do two things. What I need to create and put up online is go through the multiple choice, because some people won't have the time to put together an actual letter or a brief, what have you. So put up a sample brief for those who want to go and do it maybe on an organizational level. And then also put up a multiple choice one, which would give my thoughts or our thoughts on how you could shoehorn in those heritage ideas into the more conventional ones. And you can use that for what it's worth and submit that way. Because I think we just want volume in a way, right? You want volume to come in there. But it's also good to, I think, be connecting with your local MP too, so that it's not just kind of going up higher in the federal food chain. I'm not sure how much it trickles down in terms of report back from finance on where ideas came from. So I think it's through that system. So it's probably best to also connect with your MP on this so that they know that you're concerned about that.
Good question in the chat about what is a brief and who can submit a brief. A really good question for us to talk about here. Gil, do you want to respond to that?
Well, anybody can submit to finance. Anybody can fill in the questionnaire, or anybody can do a brief. And what I'm saying, a brief is basically it's a letter or a document that you're sending into the finance committee to look at. So it's wide open, and no one's going to get turned down. And if I could just reiterate on Chris's point, if you submit the questionnaire or the brief, it's probably not going to get back to your MP. You're going to have to take it to the MP and show him or her what you've submitted and talk to them about it. And you know, that can be fairly simple. You can just send them an email with an attachment and say, you know, we'd like to chat about this.
There's also a good question here. Could the National Trust get a partnership support letter from the Tourism, Arts and Culture Ministry? So like a joint push. It would be amazing. I'm not sure. Is that something that would be doable, Gil?
A support letter from the one of the provincial departments? Is that what we're asking? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I think Laura, yeah, I think she's in BC, if I'm remembering. But maybe she's also thinking about like an Ontario circumstance. That's the same, same ministry there.
Yeah, I would be surprised if a provincial government agency would weigh in at all publicly or support an organization's or a sector's ask, but.
I mean, in the past, I mean, it'd be tricky, I would think. In the past, we have gotten sort of municipal, provincial and territorial governments are harder to work with, but municipally, when it's, we've gotten letters of endorsement and what's the word, Natalie? Municipal council resolutions supporting tax incentives, say, for heritage rehabilitation of historic places in the past. But those have taken time. I'm not sure on the provincial front, it'd be trickier to align that because there's so many other priorities there in the provincial government. It could be challenging, but powerful if we could bring it together.
And I mean, I know we did the letter that we wrote in the spring, we shared with the equivalent at the federal level, the minister responsible for tourism, because the benefits of heritage do touch all of those sectors. So, but no, that whole sort of government relations strategy is a complex one, and one where, like, I'm now thinking, I really wish if it had been possible that we kept up the pressure, like submitting the brief in August, and then we just go off to survive other pressures. But in principle, we should have been working on this and making sure that the information was getting out there and that the shovel-ready list continued to be built in the interim. And I think that, I mean, again, as we work more and more closely together as a sector and build our collective capacity, that's really where we need to go. Like we can't just talk about the federal budget once or twice a year and expect to get what we're asking for.
Marguerite Cron has a question. Oh, go ahead, Gil. I'll come back.
Well, I was just going to say, Natalie, you're going to do that right now. We're just continuing on,
Yeah.
and you know, water under the bridge.
Out.
No, don't worry. I mean, this is what we're going to do. So go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, no, I'm just going back here a little bit in the chat list. Marguerite Cron out of Manitoba was asking about senators and how useful they are in terms of bringing this forward. What are your thoughts, Gil? I mean, we've had a lot. The Heritage Lighthouse Protection Act came out of the Senate and went into the House of Commons and came back. So, I mean, there's an example of something that you can really do amazing stuff with the Senate.
Yeah, in general, the Senate is becoming a much more useful institution than it used to be. And, you know, the short answer is it depends on the senator. You know, if the senator is motivated and willing to push the idea, and they've got to basically, you know, get to, at the federal level, they've got to get to whoever's in charge of the issue you want to talk about. If it's the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Heritage or the Minister of Tourism, just a conversation with the senator is great, but, you know, it has to lead somewhere to influence the whole process. But if you've got a connection with a senator, great, use it. If you've got a connection with an MP, an MPP, MLA, a senior bureaucrat, use it. Let them know.
Good. Now we've got some great connections. Thank you for that, Marguerite. And the idea of a joint brief with the CMA, Canadian Museums Association, good idea. And I really wish it was possible. It is possible, I think, for us to bring all the pieces of the sector together. And there were actually some really useful conversations in the spring. I think COVID kind of created this moment where there was a lot of reaching out and a lot of Zoom calls with people that we might not normally be talking to on a regular basis. And we did share our ask with the CMA. And I actually checked the brief the CMA submitted in August, which really focused on their ask is $60 million annually, I think probably for the Museums Assistance Program. So I think it's important that we not, step on each other's asks and be complementary, but certainly because so many of the places we care about in our work are our museums, but the Museums Assistance Program funding may not touch the things, it may not touch the fabric of places in the way that we need. So we do need to keep talking to each other.
There's some interesting questions there about the green plan, and Wendy's bringing up some points about coaching it in that language. And I mean, Arthur McDonald is saying he's disappointed in that the carbon plan didn't acknowledge the contributions of preserving our built heritage. In a way, have a look at it. It does sort of implicitly value that by putting quite a bit of energy into the idea of retrofits and about energy performance and upgrading the energy performance of some buildings that are recognized in that green plan. But I think it's one of our problems that we need to also, as a sector, be educating people on the value of existing places while we're also advocating for funding, because I think there's this preconceived notions around older buildings being inefficient energy hogs, irredeemably so, and that new green construction will be our pathway to a good future. But I mean, so you're sort of up against having to argue for older places as well. And their value inherently and just in their material value, their avoided environmental impacts from saving them. You don't have to cut down forests or mine the materials for concrete aggregate and these kinds of things. So I think but we need to find good ways to fit in with the logic of that green plan, but add to it, I think. And I think that there's lots of different options there for getting in there. So we can provide those too.
Okay,
Yeah.
you've got some good feedback from MPPs from the lobbying efforts of the ACO. Did you want to say anything about that?
I'll just talk to Chris's point right there, because I think that's really, really important to do that. I've been really impressed, and I'm always looking for policies that are good examples. And I was really impressed at the National Trust Conference this year to learn about the policies in Vancouver, that they have a goal of zero net carbon. They've moved to the carbon footprint, like beyond just the current emissions to looking at embodied carbon. And I think that's where we really have to go and have to find a way to get that argument. That's my personal goal, to get that down to the elevator speech. So if anybody's already done it, send it to me, please. Yeah. But the responses we've had to MPP Day, it's interesting, like I said. I think the major thing that people like is the fact that we are giving them information about it. I think that we have been kind of spotty on our follow-up. So I think that's the challenge, and we're really trying to do that more now and develop relationships. And I think we're starting to do that with some people, and it's definitely a long process. And I think we could learn a lot from Paul, who's obviously got some allies. Yeah, we've tried to develop some allies within the government staff. And also relationships with MPPs. And then the other thing I think we've done too is just increasing the awareness of this is when we've gone to local councils and we're trying to get them to save a heritage bridge, for example. We say, well, look, you could use the infrastructure money, and and here's an avenue that you could use, especially if this was if there was a heritage stream, dedicated stream. So So just getting the notion away, there's lots of opportunities to do that. Yeah.
And I see that Victoria has shared the CMA's link to CMA submission. I think ours got shared earlier in the chat. So we will resubmit, maybe use the online format and submit an updated version. And so I think the actions I've captured here in our newsletter on Thursday, which all of you will receive, we'll provide a fresh link to the shovel ready project list, and also information about how to build that list, the template, the form for submitting. We'll provide some refreshed, building on that consistent ask. We'll put some more words around that could help you either put together your own brief or to submit using the online form. We might want to dust off the shovel ready toolkit as well, which provided some good sort of basic steps in how to organize a meeting with your elected official, how to present the ask, that kind of thing, some template letters. And anything else, Chris, that we've taken away from today?
No, I think that's good. I think we'll provide materials on how to answer those, our kind of initial thoughts on answering the template and the letters, and also provide some links to those background materials, although some people have already in the chat provided the links to the briefs and that the federal green plan. So we can consolidate all of those in one place on our advocacy action page, just to make it easier for people.
Sounds good. So I think we're any additional comments from Gil or Paul or Kay?
No.
Great. So feel free to keep those comments coming in, and you'll get something from us on Thursday in our newsletter. Maybe just let's flip to the next slide. Just a couple of points we wanted to make. Young Canada Works funding. So the deadline is this Friday, and there is this source of funding for organizations to create jobs at heritage institutions in heritage organizations. The eligibility is broad, so municipalities hire young heritage staff to lead Doors Open projects. There are lots of different opportunities, and the funding is more generous than usual as a part of the COVID recovery, 85% compared to the usual 75%, and it no longer limited to summer jobs happening in the summer. So we have to take advantage of this funding that's available and make sure that we're making sure it's fully subscribed. So I would encourage you to consider that. And I will just share too, on the next slide, the National Trust Regeneration Works resources online, lots of information about fundraising. You'll find past gathering recordings there and webinars that are currently available on demand. There's a Find Funding portal as well with information about funding sources nationally, regionally, locally. And then finally, just a little note that if you're not already a member of the National Trust, we offer a 30% discount to people who've been part of these conversations. So there's the code there. Use the code new member to take advantage of that. So thank you very much, everyone. Again, we're in this together, and excited about building a stronger and stronger response for the sector to these opportunities. Thank you very much. À la prochaine.